Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're tuning in. This is yet another special episode of Tailgate Trash Talk brought to you by Backyard Sports. I got Bentley with me. How you doing, man?
It's days like today when I like to sit back and reminisce about a fateful afternoon in Tampa, Florida. It was January 1st, 2018. And, the University of South Carolina took the field against University of Michigan and had a big 7-point victory. And I guess we're just built different down in South Carolina. It's not for everyone to beat Michigan. It's only the elite of the elites that can do such things.
Jadavian Clowney remembers that game.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
We have a moment that lives on forever from that game. All right, well, I don't want to get into it right away. We're going to save it for last. But, man, what an eventful semifinal this year after 7 years of basically either both games being a blowout or at least one of them being just a boat race blowout. We got two nip-tuck tight games that came down to last possessions. One actually went to overtime. And eventually we figured out who is going to be playing for the national championship. But before that, we had some games in between last week's show and the first show of this year, I guess, if we're going to talk years. But we had some non-New Year's Bowls. We'll get to those first. Are there any that you really want to highlight here out of this group of, I think there's like 16 of these or something like that were played between last week's show, technically Tuesday, but we aired on Wednesday, so we included the Tuesday games and New Year's Day.
Yeah. Well, I think we should start by addressing what may be the elephant in the room to some folks. Is the Georgia-Florida State game. I've seen nothing but discourse. Well, I've seen a lot of things on Twitter. There's a few naysayers out there that have some issue with what happened in the Florida State game. But regardless, I've seen a lot of discourse talking about how, one specifically gifted, not earned in regards to Alabama losing. And I won't get into that side of it, right? But just to address it from the Florida State side, you and I had talked separately off the show about how we would have been comfortable taking Georgia minus 40, Georgia minus 41.5, like something like. And then I texted you during that game or right after it ended, something like that. I said, man, I don't know that I would have taken Georgia minus 60. But as I just said that in my head, I think that Georgia just scored another touchdown.
I think they did.
Yeah, there were so many Florida State people like, oh, we deserved, Alabama didn't deserve it. Bro, y'all scored 3 points, and Georgia and Florida State had the same number of players not playing in this game as they had rostered.
That is the important point, right? Because I know for a fact on my timeline, there were Florida State fans that were just, we had 19 players opt out, yada, yada, yada. Guess who else had 19 players not play in this game? Georgia. And many of them are better caliber than the players that Florida State was missing. And you lost 63-3. Let's couple that with the fact that USC boat raced Louisville.
Yep.
Okay. And it's a mess. It's a mess, right? When you're talking about Florida State, you had an opportunity to go make a statement, right? And your players decided, for however you feel about the decisions they made, they decided to take care of themselves over taking this program and making a statement against a Georgia team that it wouldn't have mattered, right? Let's be honest. It wouldn't have mattered. I don't think they're 3 touchdowns close with Jordan Travis playing, to be honest.
No.
If this happened to be a playoff, say Georgia State at 1 and Florida State got in as 4 if Georgia had beaten Bama, I don't know that this game is all that much different with Jordan Travis being healthy either. So absolute just demolition by Georgia. And Louisville went and got smashed. USC was playing with a backup quarterback. I love the troll from the Florida Gators Twitter pointing out the score of those 2 games and the score and all the things with the backups. And USC wasn't just playing with a backup quarterback, all right? They were playing without the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, the consensus number 1 pick in the NFL draft. So that's a big difference when you talk about backup versus losing that guy, right? So just an absolute shit show in the Orange Bowl. Speaking of, I want the Orange Bowl back on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're doing. I just don't know what we're doing. I know that it's a rotation with the playoff games. I get it, but the Orange Bowl belongs on New Year's Day. Damn it, NCAA. Why we always got to fuck with things?
Get rid of the ReliaQuest Bowl, man. That's not
Something,
a New Year's.
man.
That's not a New Year's Day bowl.
Jeez. What else? What else you want to highlight here?
We should talk about Jackson Dart and
Yes.
that freaking Ole Miss offense, man. How scary did they look? We talked about again. We have a lot of discourse. We try to save a lot of it for the show, but it just kind of spills over,
It's
right?
hard not to.
Yeah, so I'll relive some of our conversation. We were talking about this Ole Miss Penn State game and saying just how much better prepared the Ole Miss team looked with a month, what are the 21, 28 extra practices, something like that.
Yep.
As opposed to the Penn State team, who didn't necessarily play a bad game. Like, I thought Penn State seemed fine. They looked like the Penn State that we've seen all year long, They just went up against a better team who was more well prepared to play what is a good Penn State defense. And Jackson Dart and Quinshon Judkins went out and just absolutely shredded those guys. Like, Judkins only ran for 3.1 yards a carry, but he toted it 31 times. Like, that man was out there working.
Yep.
And Lane Kiffin had those guys out there ready to rock and roll. And, man,
that class
Oxford
they got
next
coming
year,
in, bro.
Oh, dude.
Jackson Dart's coming back.
I got to look at their schedule and see if I can make it to one of their games.
Yeah.
I need to go to Oxford next year.
They might be so fun to watch next year for sure. Yeah, Lane Kiffin had them prepared, and James Franklin didn't. Speaking of prepared, Jedd Fisch.
Yeah.
Took Arizona to the Valero Alamo Bowl against an Oklahoma team that we all know was missing a bunch, right? We talked a lot about this last week on the show. This was a game we were kind of looking at because we wanted to see Fafita and him continue his mark and Arizona stay the hottest team in college football. And they did so against an Oklahoma team that is from a perceived little better conference maybe than the Pac-12. But they were missing a ton. I get it, but Arizona, this is a nice stamp for them going into the offseason. They did okay in the portal. They've done okay with recruiting. I think they're going to be okay next year, especially returning what they're returning. I think that's the biggest thing for them. And being able to keep Jedd Fisch in-house, I think, was a huge, huge coup for them because I thought for sure he was going to get a big-time offer. And I don't know that he didn't because he got a little bit of a bump from Arizona. Maybe they were able to kind of keep him in-house. It's his alma mater, that sort of stuff. Maybe there's an attachment there. They're changing conferences too, so they've got that going for them. But this is a big win. This is a big win for Arizona. You don't always look at these kind of upper middle tier bowl games, right? The Alamo Bowl is one of those kind of not quite right New Year's Bowl, but it's one of those ones that everybody kind of knows and usually get a good matchup, some good teams. This is a big win for them. A not historically football program there in Arizona. So I think that's a real good win for them on the way out the door for 2023.
Yeah. So we saw you can go back to the title screen. I don't care. This is we saw the debut of 3 5-star quarterbacks this past weekend that we're going to see heavily featured in next year's college football season, right? We got Avery Johnson at Kansas State.
Yep.
We had Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma.
Yep.
And we had Nico Amalivia because I know you pronounced it. You spelled it out to me phonetically.
Yamaleava is how they were
guy.
pronouncing it this weekend. So I'm sticking with Amalivia though, because it's
I'm gonna call him
cooler. It's fun. It's cool.
Oh yeah,
I'm sticking with it.
100%. Mr. NIL himself.
Yeah, dude, $8 million.
Yeah, crazy. So we saw the debut of the three of those. Nico went up against what a lot of people thought was one of the three best defenses, right, in college football in Iowa.
Yep.
Jackson Arnold played against the Arizona defense, as you just highlighted. And then Avery Johnson, the highest rated dual threat quarterback and the highest rated quarterback ever to be recruited out of the state of Kansas, who stayed in state.
The powerhouse that is Kansas.
Yes. Of those three, Gary, which impressed you the most?
Nico,
Yeah.
honestly, I think Avery Johnson was great in his game. I think he played well. He showed why he was touted the way he is. He showed that K-State is going to be a force to be reckoned with next year. But I thought Arnold struggled against Arizona. Arizona's played a lot better football down the stretch, but I thought he looked a little bit he was in the deep end at times in that game. Turnovers, mistakes, bad reads. But Nico looked the part. They didn't get off to a fast start. We talked about it at the end of the first. It was zip zip. But after that point, Tennessee started to pour it on, and we almost had an over in an Iowa game, bro.
Oh, I know.
I know you had
Oh,
that ticket. We were sweating it.
yeah, won it by the hook.
Yeah, won it by the hook. But I liked what I saw from Nico against a tough defense in that system. I think he's going to be able to thrive within Heupel's system. And I think Tennessee's in good hands going forward after a couple of years of kind of transfer quarterbacks being making their mark and and then obviously Bazooka Joe, I guess, going to the NFL. Is that
He's going somewhere.
yeah. He might be playing in the UFL here in the spring.
Yeah, get ready to learn Canadian, buddy.
Yeah. But
I
yeah, I liked Nico. What do you think? What out of those three, who you got is kind of your top?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Nico looked the most prepared of all of those guys. I think a lot of that has to do with he's been involved with that system and with that team for longer than
Yeah.
have Avery Johnson and Jackson Arnold.
Yep.
Jackson Arnold, I was not the least impressed with, though, if I can put it that way. I know he made the most mistakes, right? He was also playing, of the three, the second most challenging defense, right? He was
Yep.
playing against probably the best coach of
Yep.
the three opposing teams here, right?
Yep.
And Arizona is a team that you have to score points to beat,
Yep.
right? Like you don't feel going into the Iowa game, I have to score 25, I have to score 28, right?
I scored 10. I'm probably.
Yeah, you
I'll
don't
give you.
really. Yeah, exactly, right? And you don't feel that way about North Carolina State as well. Like North
Right.
Carolina State's a good team. They're not super explosive. The strength of their team is their defense, so you don't really expect them to play well from behind, whatever. Avery Johnson was slightly underwhelming to me. He didn't make a lot of mistakes, which I appreciated, and he used his legs very well, but I didn't. Again, this is not a knock on the kid. I'm just saying of the three, and obviously he's super young and has time to develop. I didn't think that he had the most live arm. I didn't think that his passing. Obviously, I just watched Michael Penix play, so I'm recency bias. He's not Michael Penix throwing football. Shocker. I do. Obviously, he has a ton of potential, and he could be very, very good, and he's going to be a very good quarterback, right? I just think of the three that played this weekend, he probably impressed me the least. Jackson Arnold may have had, for the reason I laid out, like you go in against an Arizona team, you have to score points, right? Like
He definitely had the steepest hill.
yeah, like Nico goes in, he's like, well, if I put up 2 touchdowns, I'm good, right?
Yeah.
Jackson's like, I have to press because Fafita's on the other side, they're going to score a lot of points.
Yep.
So I think that Nico looked the best. I thought probably the most impressive performance was Jackson Arnold, even keeping them in that game as long as they stayed in it, personally. And fighting against himself, right? Like he came out and committed, but he had like 2 picks in the first half. It was like, that's tough, man. Yeah, but like he remained poised. Yeah. I thought he looked pretty good.
Yeah, I think they're in good. I mean, I think all three programs, right? If I'm being honest, I think they're all in good hands. That is an interesting point you make about the live arm with Avery Johnson. He is a bit more of an athlete than he is a pure passer for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll be curious to see how he develops in that area in terms of his ability to drive the ball down the field, his ability to make those tight window throws that we saw, as you mentioned, Michael Penix make time and time again, not Monday. Any others you want to highlight quick before we get to New Year's?
Just give a shout out to Rutgers, winning straight up.
Yeah.
They were underdogs in that game. 2 more. I really don't want to talk about Clemson, Kentucky, because fuck Clemson and Dabo. I know they made that comeback, but like, come on.
Yeah, Kentucky
come on.
laid an egg.
Choked it away. Missouri, crushed Ohio State. I know the score was only 11, but the game really wasn't that close.
Right.
Missouri was pretty much in control the whole way through. We talked about actually another thing we talked offline about was how Kyle McCord feels watching this game. I know he watched Syracuse lose their bowl game, but dear God, he's watching Ohio State thinking, "Y'all bet y'all miss me now, huh?"
Yeah, and they didn't land a guy in the portal.
Yeah,
They might be in some trouble next year at the quarterback position because
potentially.
it looks like the cupboard's kind of bare. I'll be curious to see how much they put on the full court press here with the last few guys in the transfer portal. Maybe this game opened their eyes to the fact that they might not be as good next year as they thought maybe going into the portal season. So
yeah, very much so. Perfect segue though to another team next year who's going to be absolutely fucked and absolutely in the dumps. That's Oregon State, man.
Yes.
Oh my God, lost by 32.
It started Friday, and it's going to be real bad next year.
I mean, that's just heartbreaking, dude. Like they have a great season. They win 8 games, then they lose their coach, both their quarterbacks, half their fucking roster is like out, just gone, and then to lose by 32 in a bowl game, it's like, oh.
Yeah, and it's even tougher because like they legit like just don't have a conference next year, right? I know the Pac-12 is going to try to keep the brand and keep the name, and it's them in Washington State, and they're going to play like a Mountain West Conference schedule, but that's not good, and it shows not only with all of the transfers and all of the people opting out of the bowl game, but also like they have like 5 commitments, from high school seniors, and the highest rated one's like a 2-star. It's not good up there. I mean, the Beavers are going to be they're going to be struggling, and it sucks because Corvallis is a really, really good atmosphere for college sports in general, but college football especially. And having a great year this year sucks that it's all just going to basically be for naught.
Yep.
That's such an undesirable job. Washington State's going to be hurt much less, but that's also because like Washington State is always kind of also ran in like the Pac-12, so they're gonna continue to just kind of be who they are.
The only silver lining that I think of for Oregon State is that they already have their head coach.
Yeah.
They tagged their interim. I think it was the OC there. They tagged him as the interim and then gave him the head coaching job full time. So there's no gap,
transition.
right? Yeah, like they don't have to bring in somebody new. Like they can just roll right into the regular offseason now.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for silver linings for a team that was a feel-good story this year, I mean, that's probably one of them.
Yep, for sure. All right. Let's shift to New Year's, man. 2 big bowls, and of course the ReliaQuest Bowl. Although, that was an interesting game. We talked a bit about it. It seems that the Dairy Raid offense was kind of off to a good start. Of course, they're playing LSU, right? We understand that's a bad defense somehow this year. Brian Kelly really fucked things away there in LSU, it feels like, because that's perennially a monster defense. They've always got athletes. They've always got guys going to the NFL. What are your thoughts on the ReliaQuest Bowl? Anything you take away from this? Is Wisconsin going to be a different team we look at next year?
Admittedly, I don't know how many guys were out for Wisconsin. That was not a number that I saw. I just kind of took for granted that they were going to go in and beat LSU, truthfully, and it looked like they were heading in that direction. Yeah. Their offense sputtered. I don't think they scored in the fourth quarter. I have it up. I don't want to recap, please. Yeah, no, they didn't score in the fourth quarter, right? Now they scored with a minute 18 to go in the third, so it's almost the fourth, right? But to get shut out by a bad LSU defense in the fourth quarter of a game where your offense scored 31 points like that, I mean, that's tough. I don't know. I don't feel like they turtled up in the fourth quarter. They just couldn't get anything rolling, which is a bummer because they seem to have momentum like pretty much all the way through, even right up until the fourth quarter, right? Because they scored that touchdown, or they scored a field goal rather with, like I said, a minute 18 left in the third. It's like, that's just not something you expect from a Brian Kelly defense that we know has been bad for 2 years now, playing without the Heisman Trophy winner in Jaden Daniels. It's like, that's not a way you want to start an offseason for a program you're trying to rebuild if you're Wisconsin. I mean, it just leaves a really bad taste in your mouth to see so much success throughout a game and then to have it just really fall apart in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, for sure. And you kind of look at, what they were trying to do early and what the change over is. This is a vastly different approach than we've seen from Wisconsin historically. Usually a kind of a ground and pound, lean on an offensive line. I don't know who's going to play quarterback for them next year, to be completely honest. Like Tanner Mordecai is a senior. He's gone. I don't know who plays quarterback for them next year. I don't know that they have a guy on that roster that I look at and say that's a guy that can run an air raid style of offense. So it'll be interesting to see how they progress next year. And man, like getting shut out in the fourth of a game, he scored 28 points through 3 quarters. It's a tough look. It's a tough look. Good win for Brian Kelly on his way north to Ann Arbor. So congratulations to him. Sorry, Michigan fans. I should not wish that evil upon you.
They, just for the record, they have 4 freshman quarterbacks on this roster. They have Mordecai, who's a senior, and then 4 freshmen behind him.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. We'll see it. Maybe one of them freshmen separates next year. But yeah, I don't know who plays quarterback for them next year. Oh, what about the Fiesta Bowl, man? It looked early on like Liberty was going to be game, and then reality set in, and after the first quarter, it was nothing but Oregon. Liberty did have a 6-3 lead after 1. Everybody was, oh, man, is this one of those kind of Boise State, Oklahoma type, being the Fiesta Bowl especially? No. Bo Nix, that offense got going, hung 42 unanswered on them the rest of the way, and truthfully, it could have been like 49 or 56. They kind of let off the gas late in this game. So kudos to Liberty getting to play in a big bowl. Unfortunately, they were really out of their class. Any thoughts on this? Bo Nix, kind of his swan song. He wanted to make sure that he didn't end his career on a loss, and he certainly did not do that.
Yeah. The quarterback, Caden Salter for Liberty, when he came out and, he's 6'1", standing on the field, and he puts his helmet on and he's about 6'6". I thought maybe, he's hiding some points up there in that big noggin of his. He's got all that hair tucked up under there. And I guess he had 6 hiding in there because that's all that they scored. And it's like, they come out, they score the opening drive touchdown. Vibes are high. Everybody's hyped. And then they miss the extra point. And as soon as they missed that extra point, I thought to myself, oh, shit.
Yep.
Like, this
the wind's
moment.
Out of the sails.
Yeah, like, this moment might be too big for these boys. And the favorite, fun fact that I have about Liberty, and it's not even necessarily about this bowl game, because Oregon dominated. Everybody expected them to dominate. Like, nobody really thought Liberty deserved to be in this bowl. Or
they close 24.5, I think it was.
I mean, right. Liberty's strength of schedule this year was the dead last in college football. The dead last in college football, and it showed.
Yeah.
It showed.
Yeah, for sure. They were definitely out of their league against Oregon. Again, congrats. You get the brand in front of the national audience in the Fiesta Bowl. However, you got your butts kicked.
And all their students had to race home to make curfew. It was crazy.
Yeah. Oh, man. And we close out the New Year's Day slate of non-CFP semifinal games with Iowa, Tennessee. We've already talked a little bit about this. Nico looked really good. Tennessee held an Iowa offense to 0. I don't know if that's a feather in your cap or not, because Iowa's offense seems to hold themselves to less than 10 on a weekly basis. My biggest takeaway from this is I love the combination of sponsorships with some of these, right? And this is one. Cheez-It Citrus Bowl.
Yep.
Phenomenal. I love it. I certainly am here for a lot of the fun bowl names and bowl themes and the mayo bath and some of the other things. Cheez-It bath in this one. Josh Heupel got one. They filled a Gatorade jug with Cheez-Its. That's fun, I guess, right? What are your takeaways from this game? We already talked about Nico, but if you want to talk a little more about him, certainly he was kind of the star of the show, considering it's his team next year, being the assumption after Milton declared for the draft that he probably won't be partaking in March.
Yeah, true. Maybe, who knows? There's
maybe a late round flyer on a guy with a big strong arm.
Yeah, he'll come to Washington and just be awful. So Iowa made a quarterback change. They put in Marco Lanes, who's a freshman for them. He passed the ball for 4 yards, so big ups to him. On the bright side, he led the team in rushing. So awesome, good for you, dude. I don't like the Tennessee defense played a lot better than I expected them to. If I'm being completely honest, I wasn't entirely sure how locked in they were going to be. You know, all of the hype 4 days before this game, which is when we found out that Joe Milton was not playing. We had switched to Nico. You know, the spotlight was there. Everyone's watching Nico. Nico this, Nico that, da 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 da. So I wasn't sure exactly how the defense would respond. I don't know exactly how much they see that type of stuff, or if they even let it bother them whatsoever. But it was a pretty good performance, right? I mean, you hold a Division I Big Ten West champion to 0 points. I mean, that's not nothing, right? You know, it's
for a team
momentum
that
for
we
them.
don't usually look at as hanging their hat on defense either.
Exactly. My favorite part about this game, though, was that so the two teams, they oftentimes have volunteers, not to put a pun on it, right? Tennessee, they have volunteers that will come and work the merch tents, like in the concourse and stuff, right? So because it was the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, the color palette was orange, right? So Iowa brought their own people to come work merch tents in the concourse, right? But the color was orange, so they were wearing orange shirts. And on the back of it, it said volunteer. So it's ironic that Iowa brought people who were volunteers to wear orange shirts at a team where they played against Tennessee. I just thought that was, it's an odd spectacle to see when the cameras pan through. You think, that's an Iowa logo, but it says volunteer on the back.
Yep.
It's just very strange. And I'd love bowl season for things just like that.
Just like that. Yep. Yeah, for sure. I got to feel really good, though, if I'm a Volunteers fan heading into next year, man. Nico looked good. They seem to have some playmakers on the inbound side of the portal and recruiting. I got to feel really good about, who we're going to be next year in an SEC East that it feels like it's probably going to again be Georgia, and who's going to be that team that's going to maybe rise up and challenge them. We saw Missouri give them a hard time. South Carolina played them tough for a half. It's a gettable SEC East if you can get Georgia, right? Yeah. That's obviously the $64,000 inquiry is whether or not you can get Georgia. But if you can get Georgia, it's a gettable SEC East. So yeah, Tennessee's got to feel pretty good. Missouri's got to feel pretty good on the back of a drubbing of Ohio State, despite only scoring 14 points. So yeah, it could be a real competitive SEC East next year, especially if Beamer can get them boys up for the 2024 season.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee ran the ball for 4.3 yards a carry against an Iowa team that held teams to nothing, right?
Yeah,
like they had
suffocating defense.
Exactly. They had historically low over-unders for a reason. That defense was legit and one of the best in the country. And Tennessee came out with a quarterback who just found out 4 days prior he's getting the start. He only threw for 150, right? But that's kind of to be expected as a true freshman playing in this game. But to come out with a true freshman and what were seemingly loaded boxes and still run the ball for 4.3, I mean, yeah, you mentioned if they can get Georgia, don't forget about Eli Drinkwitz and those boys over at Missouri too. They play in the East. They could be very crowded at the top in the East next year, provided, because I still haven't seen clarification if we're doing East and West. I'm going to assume that we are. So it could be crowded at the top in the East, and Nico could have these Volunteers vying for an Eastern title.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I know the Big Ten did away with East-West. I've seen a couple conflicting reports about the SEC, so I'm still operating under the assumption we've got East-West. If that changes next year, then obviously when we do our season preview, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the SEC in the proper format.
Yes, I will know by then. I promise. I promise.
Sure. Yeah, Georgia's going to continue to just reload and restock the cupboard. So that's the thing, man. If it is still East-West, whoever's going to assert themselves is going to it's the team that's going to get. If you get Georgia, that's when you look at yourself and say, okay, now we got to get the rest of the schedule, because we got Big Brother. We got to get the rest of it, so we got a chance to face the SEC West champion for what feels like another year of basically a CFP eliminator, right? All right, well, let's dive into it, man. Speaking of CFP, first game of the night, Bama, Michigan, we go to overtime, and we have some sloppy football for 4 quarters. And then, almost 4 full quarters. Then it seems like Michigan just like turned it on late offensively. McCarthy got a little bit hot. Bama had a couple breakdowns in the secondary. And then we go to overtime, and Michigan just runs it right down Bama's throat. I don't think Bama wanted to be in overtime, it felt like, at least defensively on that drive. And then we get controversial, questionable, confusing, perplexing, confounding, whatever term you want to put on it. So we've seen, you've shared, I've shared, we've seen on Twitter and more reports of like what everybody thinks that play was supposed to be, right? We heard from Saban's mouth that they kind of drew up a quarterback run, but it felt like an RPO with the play design. I don't know if that was meant to just be a distraction for Michigan. You motion the back out of the backfield. I feel like you have to run an RPO because you don't threaten the defense with anything in the backfield except the quarterback. And then the snap is bad, which we saw quite a bit throughout the game. And it feels like panic from Milroe at that point. Once he gathers the ball, he just kind of dives straight into the pile. And then I saw a replay from the backside. And if the play was drawn up to be what I think Bama fans maybe are trying to say it was supposed to be, I think it would have worked. Because there's a gap to the left, and it seems like they blocked it that way because they kicked the guard out and seal the edge. And it feels like if Milroe has an opportunity to make one cut, he's going to score a touchdown, and maybe we're going to double OT. Maybe Saban goes for 2. We don't know, right? Saban is traditionally pretty conservative when it comes to that, so I feel like we'd have been heading to double overtime. But instead, we get just a head scratcher of a play where Milroe dives into the line of scrimmage. Man, and this is all after we got like bad offensive line play from a team that had been playing really well offensively, seemingly miscommunication on the back end in the defense in crunch time when Michigan was closing in on tying that game. Special teams mistakes by one of the most sound special teams programs in the country. Michigan, they have 4, I think, miscues, missed extra point, 2 muffed punts. One almost cost them a safety. One did cost them the first touchdown. And then they had another shanked punt, I believe, in some issues. And then they missed the field goal, right? Man, it just, what do you do, right? when all of those things are going wrong for a unit that's usually pretty good. So I've talked enough. I want to get your thoughts on this game.
Yeah. So oftentimes we talk about football happening in thirds, right? There's offense, defense, and special teams. And I think that oftentimes we say that and then we kind of snicker to ourselves. We're like, well, special teams, like, okay, right. Like special teams, got it. There was an opportunity for Michigan to lose this game because of their special teams. The missed extra point is what forced this game to overtime because they would have had 21 instead of 20. The missed field goal would have won them the game in regulation. The muffed punt in the first half gave Alabama a short field, and they scored the first touchdown. And then the second muffed punt at the end of the game where the guy tried to field a punt on the 2-yard line.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Almost cost them a safety. I texted you at that moment and said, that's a safety.
Because I had goddamn close.
Like, now, the special teams coach for Michigan is named Jay Harbaugh. I don't exactly know the relation there. I would assume some sort of brother.
I think it's Jim's nephew. I think it's John's son.
Okay.
Which
makes sense because John is he's the head coach now, but he came up in the NFL as a special teams coach.
No, right? He's actually Jim's kid.
Oh, he's Jim's kid. So that's an even tougher conversation you have to have, right?
Oh my goodness.
But he's like, you can't put it all on the coach. Like the players make the plays, right? And then it was the first muff punt that gave up the touchdown was a true freshman. Got it, understood. Try to make a play in the Rose Bowl. You got to keep your eyes. You got to look the ball in. That's what you learn in baseball, fucking Pee Wee football. You got to look the ball in before you make a play. If you watch the replay, he's looking, and then his eyes go up to see where he's going to run, and the ball just drops right through his arms. The second one in the fourth quarter where he tries to field the ball inside the 5, that one is indefensible to me. I have no idea on God's green earth what you're doing. The rule forever with special teams is that if you're fielding a punt, you put your heels on the 10-yard line, and if it goes over your head, so be it.
Yep.
You don't touch it.
Farther.
Yeah, like the odds of you returning. Now I know it is against Alabama and the Iron Bowl, his history, all that stuff. The odds of you
returning to win the football game.
Oh my God, what an iconic play that was. But the odds of you returning a 97-yard punt, slim. Very, very slim.
Yeah.
That being said, Alabama also had a chance to win this game.
Yes.
Their offensive line was horrible all night long. There's a still shot of the right tackle with his arms wide out to both sides and a defensive lineman on like just out of fingertip reach on both sides going by him. And Milroe is behind him doing God knows what.
You got to pick one, bro.
Yeah, like
you get one, Milroe gets one.
Milroe is athletic enough to take one of those guys. I promise you that.
Yep.
But you got to block one. You can't. Now, I'm sure that's not on the right tackle. There probably was miscommunication. Whatever. Doesn't matter. That's an offense. It's a unit. There are 5 guys on that line. 5 guys got to block. That includes the center, who at least 5 times last night put the ball on the turf.
Yep.
He did it on back-to-back plays in the third quarter.
Yeah.
Which was the best quarter of football that Alabama played. The third quarter was where
that drive felt like Bama was going to put that game away.
Yeah.
Until 100%. Those snaps.
Even then, they recovered from the snaps. All good, right? Then Milroe puts it on the turf.
Yep.
Now, obviously, Michigan did not score after the Milroe turnover, right? But momentum. Right? Alabama's driving the ball. They're moving down the field. They're in plus territory. They're looking to go up, take a 2-score lead. Fucking Milroe puts the ball on the turf. I don't understand. Like, this was not an Alabama and Nick Saban team that I'm used to seeing after an extra 4 weeks of practice. This is one of the worst offensive performances I've ever seen from an Alabama team ever, and I watched them play USF this year. Like, it was sloppy in all facets. And a lot of people are going to look at it and say, oh, Jalen Milroe, you know, he's not that good of a quarterback, yada, 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 whatever. Okay, fine, cool. You want to say Jalen Milroe is not that good? I'm not going to argue with you. He's a phenomenal athlete. I don't know if he's a great quarterback. That offensive line is where the play starts, literally with the center. That's where it starts. That offensive line played so poorly. And credit to Michigan because their defensive line was incredible. They locked up Isaiah Bond for most of the day. Jermaine Burton was being bracketed, I believe, because the number 1 corner was traveling with Bond, or he would lock him up on his side. They had phenomenal back end coverage. All of the deep shots were basically nothing. They hit like 1, I think. Yeah. Michigan's defense played very well. Got it right. They were very good at disguising blitzes. Milroe was not able to pick it up before the play. They were sending late blitzers. You know, it was a mess. But that Alabama offensive line was so disappointing yesterday. And all of the progression that you and I talked about all year long in player development and how Nick Saban gets his guys ready, it's like it went out the window. And I didn't recognize this Alabama team from the one that I saw 4 weeks ago play against Georgia. It made no sense to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which game it was. I think it was one of the Clemson national championships where they played them, and they couldn't get out of their own way in that game. There were personal fouls here and false starts and just bonehead plays, and they seemed to put themselves behind the 8 ball. Very far and few between we see these from a Saban coach team, and it opens your eyes, right? It's a very stark, kind of abrupt jolt of reality. Like, Saban's human, and the players he's coaching are human, right? Kudos to Michigan because they could have easily turtled up with the mistakes that happened with special teams, with J.J. McCarthy throwing a pick on the first play of the fucking game. The defense makes a stand, forces Bama to punt. Of course, the punt's then muffed, and Bama does score a touchdown. But, like, all day, Michigan just kept taking punches. Their defense kept taking punches, and they just kept battling and battling and battling. And we had seen Alabama over the last month and a half, with the exception maybe the Auburn game, which is weird because the Iron Bowl, that can always be a weird game. They just kind of leaned on people and bullied them and really dominated the trenches. And Michigan did not allow them to do that on either side of the ball. That Alabama vaunted front four didn't really impact the game as much as they probably could have or should have. I think where Michigan struggled was second and third level. They couldn't break a tackle when they needed 5 yards for a first down. They'd get 3. J.J. McCarthy didn't have anybody to throw to because Kool-Aid and company were locking down. Kudos to Michigan, just staying in it, staying the course. Jim kept his guys on task, and that's a game they easily could have turtled up and let that game get away and lost by 3-4 touchdowns. And we'd all been here saying, well, this is Michigan, right? This is Michigan in January. They go and they win the Big Ten, and then they show up to the college football playoff and they get boat raced by TCU. And they get boat raced by Alabama, and it's a recurring theme with them. It's not, right? They broke through against Ohio State a couple years ago. Jim did that, got over that hump. Now they're over the hump of the college football playoff semifinals. We'll see in the finals, and we're going to talk about it here in a moment. But we do have one more semifinal to talk about. Another great game that got really weird late. Washington looked like they were going to run away, and then they decided to run this weird kind of jet sweep flea flicker play. And I remember texting you and saying, like, Washington's going to fuck away this game. They're fucking around. They're going to let Texas back in it. And lo and behold, they did.
Yeah.
Now, Dylan Johnson ends up getting hurt on a drive where they're running the clock, right? And if he didn't get injured, Texas doesn't have the dramatics of the end of this game. However, Washington had their defense on the field when it mattered, and their defense came through. And we know this team for Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and all those wide receivers and their ability to run the ball. And we've talked about their ability late in games to be able to suffocate or drain the clock, right, essentially, and take the air out of the football. Against Oregon, they did it. Against a couple other teams that late in the season, they were doing it where they really just needed to run clock and take the air out of the ball. And they were about to do that against Texas. However, the injury happens. Then there's a punt. Washington's long snapper, for whatever reason, decides he's going to go interfere with the receiver, get an extra 15 yards, and suddenly Texas has the ball at almost plus territory. They're around the 30. They get down the field. Some weird play calling with, some calls in the flat that I didn't understand, and a bunch of fade routes at the end. They went to that fade route to A.D. Mitchell about 4 times too many. I know I made that joke earlier today. I'm going to make it again. And then they ran a fade route against off coverage on the last play of the game. 4th down. Quinn Ewers is fortunate that he hit a guy standing on the sideline with the ball, saved themselves a second or two. They throw a fade route against off coverage, and that's not when you run a fade route, right? But all that to say, what a game by Washington. Played a tough Texas team. They looked like the better team for a long stretch of this game and then almost kind of gave it away late. But they were able to make the stop when it mattered. Want to get your thoughts because you were on the Texas train all year. You were on the Texas train early and often. And I got on the Texas train too late. And then Washington.
Should have stayed off.
I should have, I guess. I did this with both games, man. I all year I've said Michigan's the most complete team in football. I've never picked them to fucking win anything, basically. And then Washington, I keep singing their praises every week, and I pick Texas to beat them.
Welcome, brother. Welcome. Yeah, this is what it's like when you root for Texas. Horns down.
I know Raul, and we're going to be on the Blitz here in about 15 minutes. He's a big Longhorns fan, and I know he's feeling it today.
Yeah, so I won't take super long because I know you had the Blitz, and we got to talk about the championship game. The most confounding play call in this entire game to me was after the big play they hit to Blue for 16 yards to get down to the Washington 12. They ran like a swing pass,
yes.
To Blue again. Now he gets out of bounds, but they lose a yard
behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, like all other plays be damned. You don't have any timeouts, right? So you can't throw them in the middle of the field. Got it. there's this play in football, specifically on the route tree, called an out route, right? So like an up and out, like where you go like down the field and then you go out, right? So I don't exactly know why Quinn Ewers. I don't know if you like. My assumption was that he looked downfield, Reed was not there. I'm going to throw it away, and then he sees blue. He's like, "Oh, I'll just dump it." Like I want to believe that his thought was, "I'm going to throw this away," but then he thinks that maybe blue can make a play. But you have, what do they have? 15 seconds left.
I think they were under 20 at that point.
Yeah, you had 15 seconds left.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I don't understand why that's the thought there. So like, I know that Quinn Ewers did not have a great game. I get it. It's a big moment. I understand he got hurt at one point. You know, they had Arch warming up at the sideline. We thought potentially he could get in the game. I know that you said they went to the fade route 4 times too many, right? I didn't hate the play call, right? A.D. Mitchell was their best receiver.
Yeah.
I thought that maybe they throw it up to Whittingham at some point because he's a bigger body than Mitchell is. You know, he has the dreads. Maybe he can get cut out visibility or whatever for the DB. Yeah, like you know, something like that. I would have preferred throwing it to Whittingham, but I didn't hate the play call, right? Because you have to go to the end zone at that point. Like I said, you don't have any timeouts. You can't run anything to the middle of the field, but you can use the entire back boundary as your target marker, right? You have big receivers. A.D. Mitchell and Whittingham are big guys, right? Like long arm span, big hands, good catch radius. Quinn Ewers has the arm to get the ball there. You talked about it earlier with me. I don't know if we said it here, but we talked about how playing on the off coverage like that, you have to throw a comeback route or a back shoulder route to the front pylon, right?
Pylon, yep.
So I said I didn't mind the play call, right? I don't mind playing the one-on-one coverage, but you have to throw the correct ball for the coverage, right?
Yep.
They have to be in the huddle, and Lord knows they had enough time to fucking huddle because there was 6 hours of commercials in 2 football games. In that huddle, you have to say, "Hey, AD, I'm coming to you, but if it's off coverage, I'm throwing."
He's on top of you. I'm coming back shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. Like if he's playing deep coverage, I'm throwing back shoulder to the front pylon. If he's playing press, I'm going over the top. Like that. That's how that works. And I'm not a quarterback, and I know that, right?
Yeah.
So I thought it was the blue play out of bounds was the most confounding, but I understand why they wanted to play the one-on-one coverage and take shots to the end zone. That I understood. What I did not understand overall in totality is why Kalen DeBoer, who is one of the best play callers we've seen in college football all year long, doesn't know how to run out of clock. Like, in no world should they have punted to Texas.
Yeah.
They had been chunking them all day on the ground and in the air. Why are you? I don't understand how you can't pick up a first down. Yeah, like it just didn't make any sense to me. But
that felt like a little bit of a. I don't want to use the term turtle again, but that felt like a too conservative moment.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a Miami moment.
A little bit, landing moment. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like they could have been a little more maybe aggressive to try to convert for a first down because basically you kneel it out right once you get the first down for sure.
Do you want to heap some praise on your boy Michael Penix here for a minute?
Fucking yes, I do. I absolutely do. Which hand? This? Yeah, down here.
Yep.
Dude, I can't you can't count on one hand how many times he hit a throw that was just NFL level, right? And I know he's going to be an NFL quarterback. He's going to be drafted. Whether or not he ends up a starter in the NFL is, those things work themselves out. But he made a lot of next level throws on top of the fact that Rome Odunze, one of the key characteristics of a great wide receiver in the NFL, they always talk about is late hands on balls in coverage because DBs read hands and they get their hand near your hands to break up passes. He must have hit him 2-3 times on the sideline with balls just over the DB's shoulder. Rome's late with his hands, and they move the ball for a first down or they hit a big chunk play. But he was surgical all night. And you brought it up earlier, too. He was using his feet again, man. And we haven't seen a lot of that. He'll do it sporadically throughout the season. I think he had like 250 yards rushing on the season. He'll do it to move the chains here and there. But he must have moved the chains a half dozen times last night with his legs, and some of them in third and quite long, 8, 9, 10-yard situations. He looked a little bit like Indiana Penix again. And for those of you that don't know, he was electric at Indiana before the injuries. The injuries have kind of sapped him of his desire probably to run the ball as much as he used to, but it's still in there, man. It is still in there, and he can scoop when he wants to, when he tucks and runs. And like I said, he converted some huge third and long situations for first downs, which were enormous in this game to keep drives alive for
Yeah,
sure. He
that
looked like the best player on the field last night.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it was all that close either. He was
No.
fucking phenomenal last night.
Very quickly, that was the most athletic that I've seen him look since he was at Indiana.
Yeah.
The legs were turning, and he was moving very well. It surprised me. I didn't know that he had that in him anymore after the double ACLs.
Yeah.
So kudos to him. That was the best game I'd seen him play all year.
Yeah.
That performance, given the difficulty and close window throws that he made down the field, that was the best throwing performance I've ever seen in a college game. I know it wasn't for the most yards. Joe Burrow had more yards than him in 2019 or whatever it was.
Yeah, but
like 493.
They were just gashing.
Yeah, like he was not dropping it in buckets the way that Michael Penix was last night to receivers, like you said, with late hands, close window throws down the field. Every single deep ball I thought was going to be completed. I mean, they were all within a catchable radius. That was a performance of performances, man. Like that was for my money, that was the best college throwing the ball quarterback performance I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and it was all night long.
All night for sure. In the biggest moment too.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to it, man. We now know who will be playing for the CFP National Championship. Monday the 8th, so we got a week, right? A week of preparation for each team. I'm sure Michigan's trying to get Connor Stallions back to get all the signs or whatever. Clearly didn't work for Alabama. We have Washington and we have Michigan in Houston. Who you got in this one, man? Talk to me about this matchup and give me your pick.
Oh my God. Really put me on the spot here, dude. I haven't thought about this at all in the last 24 hours.
I bet.
I've thought about it a lot, actually, and I'm still thinking about it as I spew words out of my mouth. Penix by a tutty, believer. Okay. So, well,
all right. Okay.
Speaking of by a tutty, the line is 4.5. Michigan by 4.5.
I'm surprised it's that big, to be honest.
Where would you have put it?
2.5.
2.5? So, all right. I think I'm going Washington to win outright. Points be damned. I don't know if they win by a touchdown. What's going to sway it for me is how successfully Michigan can pressure Penix, right? If they are able to pressure him at the same rate that they pressured Jalen Milroe, Penix is going to have an issue. Mm-hmm. We've talked all year about, or you specifically have talked all year about how much better this Washington offensive line is than they were early in the year, which is correct. But we also said the same thing about Alabama's offensive line. And Alabama's offensive line is bigger, stronger, and faster than is this Washington offensive line. And they looked like a high school team against Michigan. So if Michigan is able to replicate the pressure that they put on Milroe, I think that Penix could be in for a long night, especially if Dylan Johnson is not able to play and take a little bit of pressure off of him, right? So I'm going to pick Washington to win this game. I think that they're going to be able to figure it out. Kalen DeBoer is still an elite play caller, and they talked about his offensive coordinator, Grubb, I believe was his name, who had quit football and was living in his sister's laundry room. Pouring concrete, which, I mean, crazy, right? Crazy. Yeah. Basically took the guy off the streets and gave him an OC job.
Yeah.
I think that they're going to have this offense from Washington ready to go. The Michigan defensive line scares me a little bit. But I'm going to go with Washington, man. I liked what I saw from them. Michigan did not. Now, granted, obviously Alabama's a very good team. Don't get me wrong. But Michigan, once again, did not impress me. And they have not impressed me all year long. We've talked about it over and over again. They have not come out and bullied teams. In fact, they got bullied in the third quarter of that game against Alabama.
They really did.
And, I don't know, man. I just think that Washington's offense is going to be a little bit too much. And if Washington gets out to a lead, I don't know that Michigan is built to play from behind.
Mhm.
I just don't. I like Washington.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it, and then we're gonna say to the betting public, go the other way.
Yeah, I went over 2 this last weekend,
We
so keep
did.
that in mind,
We were
folks.
consensus, and we were consensus over 2.
Yeah.
I like Washington, man, and I like that you brought up the fact of getting pressure. I will put it to you this way: they played a couple of really good pass rushing defenses in the Pac-12, Oregon and UCLA. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They have allowed 14 sacks on the season. They also have bookend tackles who are day one picks in the NFL draft. One is going this year in Fatanu, and the other one, I forget his name. Give me a Rosengarten is their sophomore right tackle. He will go in round 1 next year, most likely, if he decides he's going to leave as a junior. They also have 2 juniors at guard, and a freshman at center who's been phenomenal this year. I just think Michigan's going to struggle to get after Penix. I think that they scheme it well too. And we talked about the athleticism in terms of his ability to run the ball against Texas, but what I saw from him against Texas, who has a ferocious defensive front, he was able to elude pressure in the pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a huge difference for an offensive line when you don't have a guy who's just a statue back there and the defense can just take aim and get after him. I think that makes a huge difference. And I think that this offense, I love the creativity. I talked to you today about the fact that Saban came after Grubbs, and Grubbs basically said, like, I can't leave after he convinced like Penix and Dunze and some of these other guys on offense to come back, take one more run at it. He's like, I can't leave now, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about a guy who is that highly regarded by the best coach in college football. We see it, right? And you mentioned he's not necessarily the play caller during games, but he is a big part of designing this offense, and I think they scheme it up really well. I think Kalen DeBoer has a very good feel for flow within games as well, and I think he's going to be able to keep Michigan's defense on their heels. The loss of Dylan Johnson, which I assume we haven't gotten official word yet that he's going to be ruled out, but the way it looked, I think he's going to miss Monday. That's going to hurt them, but they've got a couple of backs I think they can still do a little bit with. They're not going to have the same level of physicality because that's what Dylan Johnson is. He's their physical, between the tackles, downhill runner. What Michigan's going to have to do is exactly what you mentioned earlier today, which is what Texas was able to do pretty well, but weren't quite able to seal the deal by doing it. They're going to have to run the ball. Blake Corum's going to have $160 and 2 touchdowns if Michigan wins this game. If he doesn't, if they're not able to control the line of scrimmage offensively, if they're not able to run the ball as well as I think they probably can, then I think Washington could win by that tutty, could win by a somewhat comfortable margin. But I'm with you. I don't know if I'm going a full touchdown. Give me like Michigan has the ball late with a chance to win with maybe 30 seconds left on the clock, and Washington gets a stop to keep them off the board, something along those lines, right? So I think it's going to be a tight game. I think it's going to be a fun game. It's a clash of styles because we know Michigan wants to stay between the tackles, and we know Washington has the ability to spread you out, despite the fact that they are pretty physical. But I love this clash of styles. I love the matchup we have. I wanted the rematch as much as you did, but I actually look at this one and I'm like, I kind of like this matchup, man. I kind of like what this is going to bring to the table with these two teams in the academy. And we're going to have an undefeated Power 5 national champion, right? So that's another piece of the puzzle here. These are two teams that are battling to keep their undefeated seasons alive. So, all right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you. Appreciate you in the comments, Dad, showing up every week. We really appreciate the support. For those that are going to stick around and watch the Blitz here in just a moment, we'll see you over there. You got any closing thoughts for us here, Bentley, on our way out?
Yeah, 2 quick things. One of them, poetic justice if the Pac-12 wins the national title the year that they are being disbanded.
Yep.
So that's another reason that I'm rooting for. There are many reasons I'm rooting against Michigan. That's one of the reasons that I'm rooting for Washington in this case. Also, quick question for you. The early lines for next year's national title are out. Who do you think the favorite is? They're at plus 400.
Plus 400.
Yeah, so there's not a lot of value there, but
Yeah. I'm gonna say an SEC team. I'm gonna say Bama.
nope.
Georgia.
It is Georgia.
Okay.
Bama is second at plus 550.
Okay.
Followed by Ohio State, Texas again, Michigan, and then Oregon.
Yeah. I can see that, man. Georgia looks so goddamn good against Florida State.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see
Yep.
that for sure. All right, man. Well, hey, like I said, I appreciate you. Appreciate all the viewers out there. For Bentley and the rest of us here at Backyard Sports, this has been another episode of Tailgate Trash Talk, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are out.